and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. I thought today I would take a segment and talk about the questions that I'm normally asked. Like, for example, when are children old enough to start taking lessons? What should they take lessons on? And there are all kinds of questions. How to take care of an instrument? Where do you put an instrument when you're not playing it? And I get all kinds of questions, and so I thought it would be good to take a segment and answer at least some of these questions. I don't know as I'll get through all of them this segment, but I'll do my best, and if we need to, we can always carry it on another segment after this one. But so to start the questions, and I'm going to not take them in any particular order because I get all kinds of questions about all kinds of things. So we'll just take them as I happen to think about them and as I happen to be able to write them down. One question I get commonly asked is, when is a child old enough to take lessons? Well, it depends upon the maturity and the physical ability of the child. There are a lot of instruments that are too large for a child to play. When I was teaching recorders at a school system, they always wanted to play the largest ones. They wanted the altos, they wanted the tenors, they wanted the basses, but their little hands are just too small. They should not be playing instruments that they're not big enough to play. And, children, when they get up to be about 6 years old, they lose their baby teeth. And when they lose their baby teeth, they don't have any teeth in the front. So I have pictures of myself, my twin sister, when we were toothless at about age 6. I don't think that any child should be playing brass or woodwinds until their second teeth are in, and they're in solidly, not just growing in, but they're in to stay and they're solid. Because if you look at the way that the mouth is, you're going to find that for brass instruments, now this is my trombone, this comes from my trombone, and it's a trombone mouthpiece, and what do they got to do? Press it up against the mouth to blow into it. If they don't have teeth across the front, or if they are wearing braces or having dental work done, that can be an issue. If they're doing flutes, then this is a piccolo, this is a Germantakt piccolo, and they're having it there, you have to hold it up underneath your lip and blow across it. What if you have braces there? It makes a difference. Now, I've had quite a few children take lessons from me who have braces, and their doctors have never refused to let them play. And I have had children with asthma, and doctors are saying that it's good for a child to have music and use their lungs, especially singing or playing an instrument if they have asthma, because it's helpful to the lungs. But if you have a child that has any kind of a medical issue at all, then you need to check with a doctor to see if they are able to play, if it's going to hurt them, and get a medical person's expertise on it. But I do know that children who are very young, their teeth aren't in right. Their teeth are there, but they're going to lose the baby teeth, and they're going to find that it's going to be very hard to play. When I taught children who had braces on, the tone was awful. They couldn't get a good tone, but why should they? They've got wires all over their mouth. Nonetheless, they were still able to take lessons. So if you take a look at some of these instruments, if you're doing a recorder, or if you're doing anything like a saxophone or a clarinet, the mouthpiece is going in the mouth, and that means your teeth are on the top of the mouthpiece. Same with saxophones, clarinets, it's the same way. So you have to know that the child is physically able to handle that he's mature enough to be able to handle that. So that's the first thing. And I've talked to my sister about, because she's a concert pianist and organist, and I said, when can children learn how to play piano? But she feels the same way. as I do about the brass and the woodwinds, children below the age of 9 probably should not be playing piano. Now, I know a lot of them do. You know, their little hands are playing whatever keys they can reach, and you don't want to deny them the opportunity to play, but their hands are not strong. Their hands cannot stretch. Their feet can't reach the floor to get to the pedals. Not that that's important. You can skip that for a while, but they have no ability to really play chords because they just don't have the hand strength and the hand width to be able to do it. And it's the same with the woodwinds. When you're talking about woodwinds, you have hand stretches, and you have to be able to put your fingers right over the holes with the hand stretches. Now, this actually is a fife, and the difference between the fife and a flute or a piccolo is the fact that it's a round hole. The mouthpiece is basically a round hole, and it's flat. There's nothing that is raised up. Now, on my piccolo, and I'll just show this to you, it is raised up. You do have the mouthpiece, the hole is there, but you do have there's an area that's raised up. And it's typical of flutes and piccolos to have that, and some of the other woodwind instruments. But you can't expect a child to be able to manage that if their teeth are not there. So therefore, you have to be aware of that. And also, so my sister said children should not take piano lessons until about 9 years old because the fingers aren't strong enough, the fingers can't stretch, and it's very difficult. Now, I do encourage parents, if their children want to play, get them toy instruments. That's all right usually to begin with. I remember when I was small, all I wanted for Christmas, my parents asked me, what do you want for Christmas? I wanted 2 things. I wanted a picture of Santa Claus and a toy saxophone. And they said, don't you want anything else? No, all I want is a toy saxophone and a picture of Santa Claus. Because I wasn't big enough to take lessons, but I always loved the woodwinds. Even when I was very young, my father played the brass, I wanted woodwinds. And since I wasn't big enough to play, then why not a toy saxophone? So I have a couple of pictures here. This is my sopranino, and I just photocopied it, and you can see the stretches of the fingers. I mean, for a small child, that's still quite a big stretch, and that's probably, this is a full size. I didn't shrink it down, and I didn't make it larger for the photograph. If you take a look at the clarinets, most of the clarinets are open-holed. Now, I understand, although I've never seen one, that you can buy clarinets that are closed holes. I imagine they're terribly expensive for people who somehow can't get their hands on the holes and cover them exactly. This is why clarinet students squeak so much, is the fact that it's very difficult to get those holes covered. Those are all open tone holes. And then also, when we talk about children, this picture, this is yours truly. I'm here at about 6 years old, and I'm missing teeth already. And I think I had lost both of them, and one of them, the second tooth was trying to grow back. But you can't expect a child to play when you have a situation where they don't have their full teeth in. Now, the teacher needs to know of any chronic health problems, and that would include things like heart trouble, diabetes. A teacher needs to know because playing an instrument takes a lot of energy. It really takes a lot of energy. And so if a child is diabetic, their blood sugar can drop. And, if they're having heart problems, they can't push their heart too much maybe. I had a student who I was arranging for physical education for them, excuse me, because I was a counselor at a high school, and we had to be very aware that she had heart problems, and there are some things she just couldn't do. She couldn't do impact sports or anything like that. So I tell students, if you're not feeling well, if you find that you're just not with it, let me know. We can take a break. So what should anyone bring to a music lesson? Well, they need to bring their instrument, music, notebooks, pens and pencils, so you can mark up the music. a water bottle, because you know a lot of practice rooms, they don't have sinks in them, and so and it's dry. The air can be dry, and it can be very drying to practice. So they need a water bottle, and it'll help with that. Tissues, soda or juice in case they need energy or in case they're diabetic and they start to lose their blood sugar, it goes too low. And I want to mention this. I put this in just because it's an interesting thing. I used to sing for the Messiah every year, and I was a soprano. And what they always used to tell us, you know, you need to keep your throat moist. Do not use tea to keep your throat moist, because what happens is that tea has in it an agent that dries your throat. So it tastes good going down. You think you're keeping your throat moist, but it's actually drying out your throat. You should use water and nothing but water if you're singing. Now, should they play a new or a used instrument? Well, if you can afford a new instrument, it's a lot more exciting for a child to have a new instrument, a nice, bright, shiny instrument. But there's nothing wrong with a used instrument as long as it's working well and it's been cared for so that it doesn't need a lot of repair. They like to have the newer instruments. I don't blame them. Everybody does. But there's nothing wrong with a used instrument. And as long as I said it's in good shape. The instruments will last for years if they are taken care of. I do have a saxophone that is so old it doesn't pitch anymore, but I believe it has metal fatigue. You know, you hear about airplanes and they get cracks in the fuselage and they get cracks in the wings, and sometimes it causes accidents and crashes, and it's because the metal has been used so much that it's actually tired and it can't vibrate, it can't act as a healthy piece of metal can. And the same is true of instruments. You can use an instrument so long, and they do last for years, but this one particular instrument that I have was already old when I got it at 9 years old. And I stopped playing it a couple of years ago because I noticed it had a pitching problem. But it's a very rare instrument. I would never get rid of it. It is a very rare instrument, but metal can get weak. So when you choose an instrument, you just have to be careful what you choose. And if you don't know about instruments, you should have somebody choose an instrument for you. And what about using two instruments instead of one, buying two flutes or two saxophones or two clarinets? If a child is going to be playing a lot, or if an adult is going to be playing a lot, they're doing concerts, they're teaching, they're playing on their own a lot, they're in bands and so forth, then it's handy to have more than one instrument. Because if one needs to go out for repair, then you've got another one to replace it. And most people who are woodwinds, and brass too, play more than one instrument. If a person plays trumpet, they probably play other instruments as well, the flugelhorn, or various other instruments that have the same kind of mouthpiece as the trumpet has. Most people who play saxophone also play clarinet and flute. It's not unusual to do that. So the only thing that would prevent you from playing multiple instruments is if you have a problem, or if you're playing at something and it's going to interfere with the embouchure. If the embouchure is the muscles that go around your mouth that hold your mouth in a state of tension so you can play with the mouthpiece in it and get the tones. And you build up a strong embouchure, you can play for hours. It doesn't bother you. But if you are a brass player and you start playing woodwinds, the mouthpiece is all different, as I just showed you, and what's going to happen is that you're going to weaken your embouchure, and it's not going to be a good embouchure, and you're back to square one. And the same thing for woodwinds. They shouldn't be playing brass. So my rule of thumb is, and I've talked to children about this, if you're playing a saxophone, don't take trumpet lessons. You know, if you want to stay with a saxophone, you can't play brass. If you want to do brass instruments, then you can't do woodwinds, because the embouchures are just so different that it makes a difference in the way that the muscles develop around the mouth. Now, I showed you the trombone mouthpiece. This is typical brass mouthpiece, but woodwind mouthpieces are like this. I don't have the reed in it, but woodwind mouthpieces are like this. They go into your mouth, and it's a whole different set of muscles around your mouth that work. So you just really have to be careful not to do anything to weaken the embouchure. So 2 instruments is good. If you're not sure a child is going to stay with it, then you wouldn't want to get them 2 instruments. But if it's obvious that they are going to stay with it and they want to play a lot, then 2 instruments can be helpful. And I already discussed 2 different instruments and the embouchure, and that's important to remember, not to do anything to weaken your embouchure. What about a practice schedule? How much should they practice when they start? I do not want any new student of mine practicing much to begin with, because they're weak. You know, their hands are weak, their mouth is weak. You have to develop an embouchure very gradually. And so I don't want them practicing more than maybe 4 or 5 minutes at a time when they first start out. And they're going to know when they've pushed it to the limit, because if you're playing an instrument and your lips start to feel weak and a little sore, I'm not saying it's a horrible sensation, but if it's weak and a little sore, then you're tired and you need to take a break. Don't push it. You're not going to get stronger by pushing it when you're already suffering some tiredness. When you're tired, stop the practicing, even if you've only practiced for 3 minutes. My rule of thumb is, if you're tired, your lips are sore, don't practice. Take a break. And I will often ask, if I'm teaching a child, are you tired? How do you feel? And especially if I know they have a medical issue such as asthma or something like that. And they'll say, yeah, I'm getting tired. Well, let's take a break for a few minutes. And then I can show them things, I can teach them things, but they don't have to be playing constantly to learn. As they get older, as they get stronger, as they practice and develop the embouchure, they're going to get stronger and stronger, and it's going to be natural for them to practice more. And I would say the same thing for the piano. Once the hands are tired and they're sore, don't push it. You know, if you push past the pain, you only make yourself weaker. So that old adage, push past the pain, it doesn't work very well when you're teaching students. If they're weak, they're weak. They have to get stronger naturally. And so that was what I would say about practicing. Now, should you buy a professional instrument or a student model instrument? I would say, for the most part, student model instruments are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They're well built. They can take a certain amount of abuse. They play well. If they're in pitch, then that's fine. You don't have to get a professional instrument. I had a student of mine who wanted a professional instrument, but she was already a good flute player. And so she bought one, cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Professional instruments are for those people who music is their life. And they are going on tours, they're in a band, they're on television regularly, you know, and they tour a lot, you know, and for them, they have to have everything perfect so they get the highest quality, and that's important. But for a student and for the playing that most people do, there's nothing wrong with a student model. Wooden instruments are much more expensive than plastics, but plastics play very well. So the student models are made out of hard rubber. They used hard rubber. They used to use it a lot. Now they use more plastic or metal. Wooden are very, very expensive. Now I brought this in. It's a picture of an open-holed flute. Most flutes, and piccolos too, which is the reason I brought in the piccolo. As you can see, with the piccolo, all of the keys are closed. That is, there's no open holes. If you press down a key, it's going to cover, and good. That's a good shot of it. No open holes. But the most expensive professional instruments are those with open holes. And with the flute, and I do a lot of flute, so I was interested to bring this in. These are going to be constantly closed when you press them. But these 2 keys here that are blackened are open-holed just like the clarinets and just like the recorders, these also. This particular student of mine who wanted a professional instrument was planning on going on tour. And she had an instrument where you could change it from open hole to closed hole. Press a little key and something would come down and close them. And so she could have all closed holes, or when she wanted them open, she would lift it up, and there are a certain amount of keys that would remain open for her. So what is the sense of that? It changes the tone slightly. If you have an instrument where your fingers are covering the holes, not a piece of metal with a pad on it covering the holes, that does make a big difference. Well, I shouldn't say a big difference. It makes some difference in the sound. For a professional, that can be important. For most people, they're not even going to hear it. So they are very, very expensive, very, very expensive. If you don't know about instruments, you need to have somebody go with you to pick them out. Don't try picking out an instrument on your own. Most dealers in a music store will allow you to do that. I've had any number of parents come and say, I don't know what's good and what's not. Would you pick out the child's flute or clarinet or whatever the instrument is? And so I do that. And I've had a lot of luck because I'll go into a store and say, I'm teaching and I have a student whose parents want to buy an instrument here. Can I try every instrument that you have in a certain price range, say for flute or saxophone or clarinet? I've never been refused. And I just go through the instruments one by one and pick the one I think would be the best for the student. And then that's the one that they buy. So have somebody help you with it. It's not easy to pick an instrument if you don't know what you're doing. For the flutes, I always look at the lower notes. Are they easy to get in? Because the lowest note on the flute is the hardest note to play. And it's also the softest, also the highest. Is the instrument in pitch with each other, with the notes? Are they in pitch with A440? Is the instrument in pitch with itself? All of these things that you need to know. A musician who knows the instrument will know that and will check on all these things. But if you don't and you just buy an instrument because it's new, that may not always be your best choice. I had a saxophone player. I got to start watching my time. I'll tell you this story and close with it, and then we'll continue with this next time to finish it. But I had a student with a saxophone, very well-known name, and his parents bought it for him because it was new. It must be all right. What could possibly go wrong with a new instrument? Well, he got it home. He could only play 3 notes, and so he brought it to me. I could only play 3 notes. And he had to change the instrument in 3 or 4 times before he actually got one that worked right. And I checked each one. Nope, this one goes back. And he finally got one that worked. And this was a very, very well-known name. It's helpful to have an instrument that has a good name. But on the other hand, you still have to check it out. They were trying to, in this type of saxophone, change the hardware in terms of how the keys actually worked with each other. That's important in a saxophone because, for example, you've got 5 ways you can play a B flat on a saxophone. Well, they didn't get it right, and as a result of that, most of the notes wouldn't play at all. They should have just kept it the way it was before and not tried to change things because it was fine as it was before. Well, I'm going to close it here. I've got quite a bit more to show you, quite a bit more to talk about in terms of the questions that I get asked, general musical information that will be handy for you to use if you're going to learn or if you have a child that's going to learn. So we'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.